Why was everyone still laughing? The morning sun hung low over Fort Adams Academy, slicing through fog and iron discipline. The air carried that sharp, metallic scent of oil and sweat, the kind that clings to ambition and fear in equal measure. Rows of cadets stood in formation, boots aligned, spines straight, faces blank with practiced pride. Then she appeared. No ceremony, no introductions, just a gray sweatshirt, black fatigues, and calm eyes that looked like they'd seen something the rest of them hadn't, something they couldn't imagine. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres walked to the center of the grinder and stopped. From the back row someone muttered, "She looks like logistics." Another snorted, more like someone's mom got lost on base. Laughter rippled, that nervous, arrogant kind that comes from people who think they already understand the world. Rachel didn't blink. She'd heard worse from enemies who'd meant it. 10 laps, she said quietly, full gear, now. The laughter froze, then scattered. No shout, no anger, just command wrapped in calm. A few cadets hesitated, as if waiting for the real instructor to step out and tell them it was a joke. No one did. By the time they realized she wasn't joking, Rachel had already started walking the perimeter. The sound of boots striking dirt echoed like a slow drumline rhythm without harmony, energy without purpose. She stopped at the edge of the field, the morning light catching the faint scar just below her collarbone, half hidden beneath her sweatshirt. It wasn't large, but it was the kind of scar that didn't come from accidents. She'd earned it, and she carried it quietly. From above, Colonel Hayes barked, "Listen up. Lieutenant Commander Torres will be your physical instructor for the next 6 weeks. You will give her the same respect you give every officer." The cadets shifted uncomfortably. Respect was easy to say, harder to mean. Cadet Eric Vaughn, tall and broad-shouldered, whispered to his friend, "She looks more like a fitness blogger than a SEAL." Cadet Nolan Briggs, his shadow and resident comedian, grinned. Probably a desk transfer from admin. Got that PowerPoint and protein shake vibe. Rachel heard every word. Years in the field had sharpened her hearing and her patience in equal measure. She didn't react. "Not yet. We'll start simple," she said, voice low, even. 2-mile warm-up, then gear drills. Vaughn crossed his arms. 2 miles, that's it. Her tone didn't change. "You can add distance if you're feeling brave." A few chuckles. Tight, nervous, she let them laugh. They wouldn't be laughing long. The formation broke. Boots hit the dirt. Rachel jogged beside them, no whistle, no shouting, just the steady rhythm of her breath, perfectly timed, perfectly measured. The cadence of someone who'd run through worse places than this. By the first mile, the confident chatter turned into grunts. By the second, the grunts turned into silence. Rachel didn't slow, she didn't sweat. Her pace was surgical, efficient, relentless. Vaughn tried to outpace her, the veins in his neck strained. Sweat darkened his collar. He looked sideways, she wasn't even breathing hard. "Ma'am," he gasped, "you said 2 miles." "I did," she replied. "That was before you started complaining, now it's 4. No smirk, no cruelty, just fact. A few cadets groaned, but none dared speak again. The sound of boots became one long heartbeat, thudding through the mud, through pride, through everything they thought they knew about strength. When they finally stopped, half of them collapsed. Rachel didn't. She stood at the line, breathing steady, clipboard in hand. "Recover," she said simply. Colonel Hayes watched from the tower, faint smile under his mustache. He'd seen her method before. Not power, presence. Eric Vaughn wiped sweat from his brow, glaring up at her. "You trying to prove something, ma'am?" Rachel looked down at him, not angry, not smug. "Nothing to prove, cadet. I already learned what you're still chasing." Her words hung there, heavy, simple, true. "Discipline," she added softly, "is learned, not claimed." No one laughed this time. Rachel turned away, her gray sweatshirt clinging faintly to her shoulders. The morning wind picked up, carrying her voice like an echo through the silence she left behind. They didn't know it yet, but something in their world had shifted. And she'd just begun breaking them down, the only way soldiers are ever built back up. The next morning came with low clouds and steady rain. The kind that soaks everything slowly, the kind that tests your patience before it tests your body. Rachel stood at the grinder again, clipboard tucked beneath one arm. The cadets assembled sluggishly, their jokes sharper, their confidence thinner. "Morning, ma'am," Eric said, voice tight with something between sarcasm and fatigue. "Heard we're running again. You sure your knees can handle another day?" Briggs chuckled behind him. "Yeah, she probably stretches with yoga podcasts." Rachel checked her watch. "Since you're all awake enough to joke," she said evenly, "make it 5 miles, full kit." The laughter died. "Ma'am, it's raining," Vaughn began. She looked up, eyes calm. "Then it's good training weather." No need to shout. Authority wasn't in her voice, it was in the silence that followed it. The run began. Mud splashed, straps slipped, the sky opened wider. Rachel ran with them, same pace, same load, same rain biting into her skin. By the second mile, Vaughn's grin was gone. By the third, his breath came ragged. "She's not even human," Briggs muttered. Rachel heard him, every syllable. She didn't respond, she just ran faster. When they finally reached the field again, the ground was a mirror of brown water. Rachel's sweatshirt was soaked through, but she stood straight, calm, clipboard untouched by mud. "Drop packs," she said. "Form up, we're not done." Head snapped up in disbelief. "Ma'am." Her answer was a whistle. Then drills, push-ups, crawls, rope climbs, balance runs on slick beams. The air smelled of wet canvas and exhaustion. Vaughn cursed under his breath. "This is insane." Rachel crouched beside him mid-climb, her voice calm, close. "No, cadet, it's discipline, the difference between quitting and surviving." He spat mud. "This isn't combat." Her eyes flickered, cold and far away. "You're right," she said quietly. "Combat doesn't stop when you want it to." Something about her tone, not military, not rehearsed, froze him. It was field. The kind that doesn't need to prove it's seen war. It carries the memory in its silence. The rain thickened. The field turned to sludge. Rachel blew the whistle. "On your bellies, low crawl, 60 yards. 60, someone shouted. She didn't answer. She just dropped into the mud and started moving. The cadets hesitated, then followed. The ground swallowed them. Mud seeped into sleeves, helmets scraped under wire. Rachel's form was perfect. Elbows tucked, hips low, head steady, breath measured. She moved like she'd done it 1,000 times before because she had. Halfway through, Vaughn accidentally drifted into her lane. His arm caught her shoulder, knocking her chest into the mud. Cold water rushed down her collar. Laughter broke out. "Oops," he said lightly. "My bad, ma'am." Rachel didn't answer. She pushed herself up, slow, deliberate, like a machine rising through the earth. Mud slid off her sleeves. Her eyes met his. The laughter died on contact. "Cadet Vaughn," she said softly, front and center. He hesitated. Then, for the sake of appearances, he rose, pride burning through fear. "You think this is a joke?" she asked. He swallowed. "No, ma'am." "Good, lead the next crawl." He waited for her to flinch. She didn't. Rachel dropped to the ground again, and what followed wasn't punishment. It was education. She showed them what precision looks like when born from survival. Her body moved with ruthless grace, every motion necessary, every mistake costly. Rain splashed off her back like applause that wasn't deserved. "Watch your sightline," she called out. "Chin rides high, that's a bullet catcher. Do it right or do it again." The field went silent except for the sound of her moving. Vaughn tried to mimic her, failed. His strength was loud. Hers was silent. When she reached the end, she rose in one clean motion. "Again," she said. Vaughn leads, everyone watches him, then you copy me. The laughter that had once fueled them was gone. All that remained was the sound of effort, the birth of respect. As the rain poured harder, something subtle shifted across the field. They were no longer mocking her. They were trying to understand her. Rachel watched them crawl through mud, one by one, and in her mind the rain became sand again. Afghanistan, a burned-out compound, a man's voice over comms shouting through static, "Move, Tors, move." She blinked and the memory vanished. Only rain, only mud, only silence. Her voice cut through the storm again. You don't rise when it's easy. You rise when it hurts. The cadets pushed forward, breathless, broken, and for the first time listening. Rachel stood over them, soaked, scarred, unshaken, and somewhere in her eyes lived the kind of truth no lecture could ever teach. Strength doesn't shout. It endures. And this was only the beginning. Why did the rain always feel heavier when she ran with them? Morning bled gray across Fort Adams, the kind of light that made metal look colder, uniforms darker, and spirits slower to rise. The storm hadn't ended. It had simply changed shape, hanging in the clouds like a threat waiting to fall again. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Tors stood at the grinder before the first cadet even arrived. Her sweatshirt clung damp to her shoulders, hair pulled back tight. The clipboard under her arm was dry somehow, it always was. She didn't rush. She didn't stretch. She just waited, breathing in the silence that came before another day of rebuilding. One by one, they arrived, boots slapping against wet concrete, voices low. The laughter was quieter now, but not gone. Arrogance dies hard. "Morning, ma'am," Cadet Vaughn said, his grin returning like a shield. "Heard today's run in the rain again. Hope your old knees can handle round 2. Behind him, Briggs snorted. "She probably sleeps in a yoga mat." Rachel didn't look up from her clipboard. "Since you're all awake enough to joke," she said evenly, 5 miles, full kit." Groans. A few eyes rolled. "Ma'am, it's raining," Vaughn pushed, his tone half complaint, half dare. Rachel met his eyes for the first time, calm, unflinching. "Then it's good training weather." The words landed like a weight one wanted to carry. Colonel Hayes watched from the tower again, expression unreadable. He'd seen this before, cadets with too much muscle and too little understanding. He knew she wasn't training their bodies. She was breaking their habits. The run began. Mud swallowed boots. Rain ran like cold fire down their necks. Packs thudded against spines, straps cut into shoulders. Rachel ran with them, same gear, same pace, same mud clinging to her knees. No one outpaced her. No one ever did. By mile 2, Vaughn's breathing had turned into a rasp. Briggs slipped twice, cursing both times. Rachel moved like a machine, efficient, composed, unbothered. Her strides measured, her rhythm unbroken. "Still think she's bluffing?" Briggs gasped. Vaughn shook his head. "Nobody's that calm. She's gotta be proving something." Rachel heard them. She always did. Years of extraction ops had taught her to listen for whispers through chaos, the human noise that comes before the real fight. She said nothing. She just increased the pace. By the time they hit the field, the dirt had become rivers. The rain was relentless, slicing across faces, soaking everything. "Drop packs," she ordered. "Form up." They hesitated. She blew the whistle one sharp note. Reflex took over. Push-ups, crawl lanes, rope climbs now. They groaned but obeyed. No one wanted to be the first to quit. The air smelled of iron, canvas, and mud. Vaughn cursed, slipping during the crawl. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "We're not grunts." Rachel crouched beside him mid-motion, voice level but close enough for only him to hear. "Then prove it, keep going." "I'm done," he snapped. She rose slowly, mud streaking up her sleeves. "Then you can explain to Colonel Hayes why your unit failed under your lead." The mention of failure hit harder than the rain. Vaughn froze, jaw tight. Rachel's eyes held him there, quiet, calm, unblinking. "Careful, cadet," she said softly. "You're close to learning something, you just don't know it yet." She turned away before he could answer. Behind her, the cadets whispered again, but this time the tone had changed. No jokes, no mockery, just unease. By mid-morning, the storm was in full command. The field was nothing but water and grit. Every movement took twice the effort. Every breath came heavy. Rachel moved among them like a shadow. No shouting, no anger, just silent precision. She adjusted a strap here, corrected a stance there. Every correction mattered. Every movement was measured. Briggs stumbled near the low beam, slamming a knee into the mud. Rachel caught him by the shoulder before he fell again. "Balance is discipline," she said, "not luck." He nodded weakly, too winded to respond. Vaughn watched her from a distance, every calm word she spoke making his frustration burn hotter. He wasn't used to silence being stronger than sound. He wanted to crack it. So when she called for another low-crawl run, he saw his chance. The line dropped into the mud. Rachel went down with them, elbows slicing through water, movement clean, compact, efficient. Vaughn drifted closer, deliberate. His forearm brushed her shoulder, harder than needed. She hit the ground with a splash. Water soaked her chest, pressed cold against her ribs. Someone laughed. "Oops," Vaughn said. "My bad, ma'am." The formation broke discipline for a heartbeat. Laughter in the rain, sharp and nervous. Rachel didn't move right away. She pushed her palms into the mud, rose slow, precise, and faced him. Mud ran down her chin. She didn't wipe it away. She let it fall. "Cadet Vaughn," she said, "front and center." He froze. Everyone else did too. The rain drummed against helmets. He tried to smirk, to play it off, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, ma'am." "You think this is a joke?" she asked. "No, ma'am." "Good," she nodded once. "Lead the next crawl." He hesitated, but the silence behind her demanded obedience. He dropped back to the mud. "Everyone watches him," she said. "Then you copy me." The whistle blew. Vaughn started crawling, messy, loud, inefficient. Every splash cost him energy. His elbows flared, his knees kicked too wide. The wire above hummed with every mistake. Rachel followed beside him, smooth and silent, her motion perfect. "Closer, cadet, don't fight the ground, use it. It's not your enemy." He clenched his jaw and tried again. Her voice stayed low, surgical. "Fast isn't loud, fast is quiet." Halfway down the lane, his rhythm improved. The laughter was gone. The cadets behind him were watching, not mocking. By the time he reached the stake at 60 yards, he was breathing like an engine, ragged, hot, alive. Rachel rose beside him in one clean motion. "Again," she said. He groaned but obeyed. The next crawl was quieter, smoother, real. Rachel moved with them, every inch a demonstration of control. The rain pounded harder, but no one complained this time. Their bodies moved together, clumsy, raw, but united. For the first time, they weren't fighting her. They were following her. Later, when the drills ended and the cadets stumbled off toward the barracks, Rachel stayed behind. The rain slowed to a whisper, but her mind didn't quiet. The mud under her boots looked too familiar. It was Fort Adams anymore. It was Helmand Province. She could hear it again, the stutter of rifles, the smell of diesel and blood. A voice on comms. "Tors, move, you're exposed." The ground there wasn't just mud, it was survival. Every crawl, every breath was a calculation. Live or die. She saw Dean Harper's face in the sand again. Sunburned, fearless, shouting orders through smoke. "You get them home, Tors." Her chest tightened. She blinked once, grounding herself back in the rain. The field was empty. Only the sound of water hitting the earth. Rachel turned away, walking slowly toward the armory, each step heavier than the last. That night the base was quiet. The storm had broken, leaving behind a sky too dark for stars. The barracks lights flickered, muted through fogged windows. Inside, cadets slept the kind of sleep that only exhaustion buys. But not Rachel. She sat alone in her quarters, the small lamp throwing a pale circle of light across her desk. A metal lockbox sat open in front of her, scratched, old, carried from base to base for over a decade. Inside, a folded seal trident patch, its gold dulled to bronze, and a photograph. 4 soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder in a desert of dust and ruin. One of them Harper. She brushed her thumb over his face. He was laughing in the photo, fearless, the kind of man who made chaos sound like a game. Her breath trembled. For a moment, she was back there again. The explosion, the screaming, the deafening silence that followed. Then his voice weak, fatting, "You get them home." Her voice cracked in the quiet room. "I'm trying," she whispered, "still trying." The rain outside started again, light, soft, like memory tapping on the window. She closed the box gently, pressed her palm flat against the lid. "Still keeping my promise," she murmured. Then she sat back, eyes on the window, her reflection faint against the glass, her face calm, her wristband catching the dim light, the faint outline of the trident just visible beneath the leather. Tomorrow, she knew, the jokes would start again. And so would the lessons. Because discipline isn't taught in comfort. It's taught in the storm. Why were they called to the auditorium with no notice? The question rippled through Fort Adams before dawn. No drills, no schedule, just one order echoing through the loudspeakers. All cadets report for briefing, full attendance, immediate. Rain had stopped during the night, but the ground still shimmered like wet steel. Boots slapped puddles as cadets filed across the courtyard, exhausted, bruised, their uniforms streaked with dried mud. Even Vaughn's usual grin was gone, replaced by a stiffness he didn't recognize. Inside the auditorium, the air buzzed with confusion. Flags lined the walls, the kind of fabric that only moved when history decided it should. The stage lights hummed softly, throwing pale gold across the rows of young faces. Rachel Torres sat off to the side, posture perfect, expression unreadable. Her fatigues were clean, her hands folded on her lap. You could mistake her for calm, but calm and control are not the same thing. Colonel Hayes stood beside her, flipping through a thick folder of sealed documents. The murmur of cadet whispers filled the space. "Maybe it's a disciplinary briefing," someone muttered. "Nah," Briggs said, rubbing his sore shoulder. "Probably another speech about unity or whatever." Eric Vaughn leaned forward in his seat. "I bet she complained about us to the colonel." Briggs shrugged. "Guess the yoga instructor needs backup." Rachel didn't look their way. She learned long ago, mockery is noise, silence is power. Then the colonel stepped up to the microphone. "Cadets," he said, voice cutting clean through the chatter, "this morning's briefing will be different." That word "different" quieted the room. "You've met your new physical instructor, Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres. Some of you," he continued, "believe you already know her." His tone sharpened, but assumptions in the field or out can be fatal. He clicked a small remote, the lights dimmed. A single slide appeared on the massive screen behind him, the emblem of Naval Special Warfare Command. Whispers flickered through the crowd. Then another image. SEAL Team 2, Operation Sentinel Dawn. Underneath, Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres' Silver Star for Valor. The room went silent. Someone in the back whispered, "No way." Another voice, low and stunned, "She's a SEAL." Eric Vaughn's breath caught. He looked at her, the woman he'd shoved into the mud, the one he'd laughed at, challenged, underestimated. She didn't move, she didn't even blink. The colonel's voice didn't soften. Lieutenant Commander Torres served 12 years in naval special operations, multiple deployments, classified missions. She has led rescue operations under fire and carried her wounded through enemy territory. You may know the name Operation Sentinel Dawn. What you don't know," he paused, "is that she held the perimeter when the rest of her team fell." The next slide was a photo. Rachel, younger, gear strapped tight, desert wind lifting strands of her hair. Behind her, smoke billowed from a burning convoy. Another photo, a helicopter landing in dust. Then one more, her kneeling beside a wounded man, hand pressed to his chest, eyes steady, face streaked with dirt and blood. Vaughn stared at the image like it was someone he'd never met. And maybe it was. Colonel Hayes set the remote down. "Commander Torres," he said quietly, "the floor is yours." Rachel stood. No fanfare, no hesitation. Her boots were silent against the stage floor. She faced the sea of faces that had once looked at her with mockery, now frozen between awe and disbelief. Her voice, when it came, was calm. "I know most of you didn't believe in me yesterday," she began. "You laughed. You doubted. Some of you thought this was a test in name only." Her gaze moved across the rows, not angry, not vengeful, just steady. "I don't blame you," she said. "Ignorance is part of training, but respect, real respect, isn't given. It's earned." She let that hang. No one moved. "It's earned," she continued softly, "in the mud, in pain, and in silence." Behind her, the screen flickered again, this time not photos. Video. Helmet cam footage. A storm of dust and gunfire. A convoy split in half by an explosion. Voices shouting orders, confusion, chaos. Rachel's own voice crackled through the comms, calm, direct. "Hold line, 2 down left side, move to cover." Then a flash. The screen filled with smoke, then cleared to reveal a soldier dragging another through sand. A woman, small, fast, relentless. "Sorry." The video froze mid-motion, capturing the moment before the blast wave hit. The expression on her face wasn't fear, it was purpose. In the audience, Vaughn's stomach dropped. He remembered that same calm from the field, from the rain, from the way she never shouted. Now he understood. Rachel turned away from the footage, eyes scanning the room again. "Every one of you," she said, "will face something that tests you. It won't always look like combat. Sometimes it's failure, sometimes humiliation, sometimes it's fear." Her tone was even, but the silence in the room trembled. "You thought yesterday was about fitness," she continued. "It was. It was about how you react when the ground takes you down, because it will. It always does." She didn't have to raise her voice. Every word carried weight because it was carved from experience. Her eyes found Vaughn in the second row. She didn't call him out. She didn't have to. He looked down first. "I've seen men mock what they didn't understand," Rachel said. "I've seen arrogance break faster than bone, and I've learned that strength doesn't shout." She paused. "It doesn't need to." The next slide came up, a team photo. Rachel in the center, 6 other operators around her, sun-bleached smiles, dirt on their faces, pride in their eyes. One of them, Chief Warrant Officer Dean Harper, had his arm around her shoulder, grinning like a man who'd never once doubted her. Rachel's breath hitched, just barely. "This," she said quietly, gesturing to the screen, "was my family." Her tone changed, softer now, like talking to ghosts. "We didn't wear rank out there. We didn't care who led the laps or who cracked the jokes. We cared about who got up when they were hit, who finished what they started." The room stayed silent. Even breathing felt disrespectful. "You have that same choice," she said, eyes finding each of them. "Every day you're here." Her voice broke just enough to sound human. "Because one day you'll be out there, in a storm no one warned you about. And you'll realize strength isn't about who talks the loudest. It's about who still moves when no one's left to watch." Colonel Hayes stepped forward again, clearing his throat. "Cadets," he said, his tone gentler now, "Lieutenant Commander Torres is living proof that discipline and courage are not theoretical. They're earned." He paused. Remember that before you measure anyone by appearance again. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was reverent. Then slowly, the applause began. Not the crisp, shallow kind born from ceremony, but the slow, heavy rhythm of realization. Rachel didn't smile, she didn't bow, she just nodded once, her expression steady. At that moment, she wasn't their instructor. She was their mirror. Every cadet who'd ever doubted her saw themselves reflected, small, untested, humbled. Vaughn felt heat crawl up his neck. He wanted to vanish, wanted to apologize. But you can't apologize for blindness, only for what you do after you see. As the applause faded, Rachel spoke once more, quieter than before. The mud teaches faster than words ever could. Then she stepped down from the stage, walking past the rows of stunned faces. Her boots left faint prints on the polished floor, small symbols of every place she'd ever survived. She passed Vaughn's row. He looked up. Their eyes met. She didn't glare, she didn't forgive. She just saw him the way veterans see the young, not as enemies but as unfinished stories. When she left the auditorium, no one spoke for a long time. Later that day, the rain began again, light and unhurried. Vaughn sat on his bunk, staring at his mud-stained boots. His pride had been armor once, but now it felt like a bruise. Briggs broke the silence. "She's a SEAL," he whispered, disbelief still hanging on every syllable. Vaughn nodded. "Yeah. She could have destroyed us out there. She didn't." Vaughn's jaw tightened. She didn't need to. Outside, Rachel walked the perimeter alone. The drizzle beaded on her sleeves. From the tower, Colonel Hayes watched her silhouette, small, calm, unmovable. He said quietly to himself, "They'll never forget this day." That night, the base felt different. The laughter in the barracks was gone, replaced by something else. Not fear, not guilt, respect, the kind that doesn't need words. In her quarters, Rachel stood by the window again, watching the rain. Her reflection in the glass looked older somehow, or maybe just more at peace. She traced the outline of the trident hidden under her wristband, and whispered the name she'd carried for years. Harper. For a moment she let herself feel it, loss, pride, memory. Then she straightened, exhaled, and turned away from the window. Tomorrow would bring new drills, new pain, new chances to rebuild what arrogance had broken. But tonight, for the first time in years, she allowed herself a quiet truth. Respect isn't taught. It's remembered. Why did silence feel heavier than shouting? The morning after the briefing, Fort Adams was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that comes after truth has finally landed. Every cadet moved differently now. Straighter spines, sharper salutes. The echoes of laughter had been replaced by something harder to carry, respect born from guilt. The field was still wet from the night's drizzle. Puddles shivered under the rising sun. The air smelled like wet earth and detergent, clean but heavy. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres stood at the far edge of the grinder, hands behind her back. Her uniform was already streaked with mud. She didn't need to be clean. She needed to be real. Colonel Hayes watched from the observation deck, arms folded, eyes narrowed behind his glasses. He didn't interrupt. This was her arena now, the same ground that had once mocked her, now turned into her classroom. The cadets stood in formation. No jokes, no whispers, just the rhythmic sound of boots shifting, nervous, waiting. Rachel studied them for a long time before she spoke. "Today," she said, voice carrying across the damp air, "you'll learn what endurance actually means." No one dared respond. This is your final evaluation. Not about speed, not about time. It's about endurance, teamwork, and how you carry the person next to you when they fall. Her tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Out there," she said, nodding toward the obstacle course that stretched across the open field, "no one finishes alone. No one is left behind. You move together or you fail together. Understood?" The chorus came unified. "Yes, ma'am." Rough but real. A faint smirk tugged at Colonel Hayes' mouth. He'd heard that sound before discipline taking root. Rachel nodded once, then earned it. The whistle blew. Mud splashed, boots pounded, the course swallowed them whole. First came the rope net, slick, heavy, hanging 12 feet high. Rainwater ran down its knots, making every grip a gamble. Cadet Nolan Briggs climbed halfway before his boot slipped. His knee slammed into the net. Pain flared. He almost let go. But then a hand caught the strap of his pack, Eric Vaughan's. No hesitation, no mockery, just grit. "Move, Briggs," Eric barked. "We're not stopping." Rachel's voice cut through the wind, sharp but proud. "Good, that's what a team sounds like." They reached the top together, breathless, drenched, but alive. They dropped hard into the mud below and rolled back to their feet. The next obstacle loomed, balance beams, half submerged, coated in slick brown slime. Cadets wobbled, cursed, caught each other before falling. Rachel paced alongside, eyes never missing a movement. "Center your weight," she ordered. "Hips steady, match your partner's rhythm." Her tone was surgical, not shouting, not gentle, just truth. Briggs nearly slipped again, but Eric grabbed his arm and steadied him. The difference was clear now, arrogance replaced by instinct. Half an hour in, the formation reached the 12-foot wall. Slick plywood, a single rope hung from the top, dark with rain. "Pair up," Rachel called. "If you can't climb it, you pull someone who can't. Nobody stays down." Mills, smallest in the unit, struggled. His boots slid again and again. His hands trembled. He was seconds away from breaking. Eric saw it. He crouched, locked his hands together. "Step up, Mills, I've got you." Mills hesitated, then planted his boot in Eric's palms. "Go," Eric grunted. The smaller cadet reached, caught the rope, hauled himself over the wall, gasping. At the top, he turned back and reached down. "Come on." Eric grabbed his hand, and together they climbed over. Mud poured off their sleeves like sweat. Rachel watched from below, silent. For a second she saw something else. A flash of heat, sand, smoke. Helmand Province, 2014. Dean Harper shouting over the gunfire. "You get them home, tours." She blinked, the image faded. "Keep moving," she called. "That wall's not your enemy, time is." The next stretch was the crawl trench, the same mud pit that had once been her battlefield with Vaughn. Now it looked different. Not punishment, not humiliation, a test. Rachel dropped to the mud beside them, not above, beside. "Stay low," she ordered. "Control the panic. Mud's just earth and water, you've faced worse." She meant it. Vaughn crawled ahead of her, every movement echoing the lessons she drilled into them. Plant, pull, breathe. Plant, pull, breathe. Halfway through, his arm buckled. Pain shot up his shoulder. He collapsed, gasping, face half buried in mud. Rachel was beside him instantly, one knee sinking deep. "Talk to me," she said, calm but urgent. "Where?" "Shoulder," he hissed. "Cramp." "Then listen to me," she said. "If you fall, your team fails. Get up." "I can't." Her voice sharpened, still quiet, but sharper than any shout. "Yes, you can. You've been saying you can't since the first day I met you. You're out of excuses." Their eyes locked, her steady, his trembling. "You said this isn't combat," she said softly. "You were right. This is worse. In combat, quitting gets people killed. Here, it just gets you forgotten." He swallowed, grit filled his teeth, then inch by inch he moved. Elbow, knee, elbow, knee. Rachel rose, moving with him. "That's it," she said, voice low but proud. "That's how you lead from the ground." The others saw it and matched his pace. The crawl line moved again, synchronized, relentless. No jokes, no complaints, just motion. By the time they reached the end, the mud trench looked like a battlefield, raw, gutted, real. Then came the sandbag carry, 50 meters of agony. The air buzzed with exhaustion. Cadets stumbled, faces streaked, uniforms clinging like second skin. "Carry your partner's weight like your own," Rachel ordered. 50 meters, no drops. Eric slung his bag onto his shoulder, then reached for Nolan's. "Take half," Nolan said through ragged breaths. "No," Eric grunted. "You carried me when I was an ass, my turn." Every step hurt, every muscle screamed. But they kept moving, together. Rachel walked behind them, mud clinging to her boots, eyes steady. Her voice carried over the chaos, calm as thunder before lightning. "This is where teams are made. Not in clean halls, not in classrooms. Out here in dirt, in pain, in silence." Nolan stumbled. Eric caught him, bearing the extra weight. "Don't quit," he said, voice raw. "We finish this together." Rachel's expression softened for a moment. Pride, pain, memory all blurring together. "That's it," she whispered. "That's what it's supposed to look like." The formation pushed through the final stretch, stumbling, slipping, shouting through exhaustion, until they crossed the finish line as one tangled group of mud-covered, trembling soldiers. Rachel blew the whistle once, sharp, final. "Recover," she said. No one spoke. Only the sound of rain dripping from helmets and the heavy breathing of people who had nothing left to prove. From the tower, Colonel Hayes lowered his binoculars, speaking quietly to the other instructors. "She rebuilt them," he said. Rachel turned to face her cadets, faces streaked with mud and rain, shoulders slumped but proud. "You passed," she said. "Not because you're strong, but because you learned what strength actually is." Her gaze swept across the line. No favoritism, no softness, just truth. "Now you understand," she said. "The mud isn't punishment, it's the classroom." Eric straightened, chest heaving. For the first time since she'd arrived, he didn't look at her as competition. He looked at her as something else, a leader he finally understood. He nodded sharply. "Thank you, ma'am." Rachel returned the nod, no smile, no words, and turned toward the tower. Colonel Hayes met her eyes and said quietly, "You didn't just train them, you reminded them." She tilted her head. "Reminded them of what?" "What soldiers are for," he said. Rachel said nothing. She didn't need to. The truth was already written in the mud drying on their uniforms. As the cadets dispersed toward the barracks, the mist lifted slowly over the field. The morning light caught the faint gleam of Rachel's trident pressed into her wristband, the one she never removed. The sun cut through the fog in thin golden blades. The storm was gone, but the lesson lingered. Every cadet walked differently now, quieter, straighter. Changed. Rachel stayed behind, watching them go. The mud around her boots cracked and dried in the growing heat. For the first time since she arrived at Fort Adams, she allowed herself to breathe, not relief, but release. They had stopped laughing and started becoming. Why do the quietest nights echo the loudest memories? The rain had stopped at last, but its ghost lingered in the air, damp, heavy, alive. Fort Adams slept. The barracks were dark, save for the faint glow of a few emergency lights and the rhythmic hum of distant generators. The kind of silence that made the smallest sound, a boot creak, a breath, feel like confession. Inside a narrow room at the end of the hall, Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres sat alone at her desk. The light above her flickered, steady then fading, humming just loud enough to fill the space where voices used to live. Her hands rested on a small, battered lockbox, scratched, dented, corners worn smooth from a decade of travel. It had followed her from base to base, through redeployments, through losses, through silence. She turned the key. The click sounded louder than thunder. Inside, wrapped in a folded handkerchief, lay two things. A seal trident patch, its gold dulled to bronze, and a photograph, 4 soldiers shoulder to shoulder, dust in their hair, fire in their smiles. Rachel stared at the photo for a long time. Chief Warrant Officer Dean Harper stood second from the right, taller than the rest, grin wide, sunburnt, fearless. The kind of man who never checked the odds before jumping into hell. Her thumb brushed over his face. "You should have been here," she whispered. The rain outside began again, soft, hesitant, as if it remembered something too. Flashback. Helmand Province, Afghanistan. 9 years earlier. The air was smoke and static. The sky bled orange from burning oil. Her platoon had been ambushed during an extraction. Intel had gone bad, a setup from the start. Rachel was on point when the first explosion hit. The world cracked open, dust rising in waves. Comms went wild. Contact left, contact left. We're pinned, repeat pinned. She hit the dirt, breath ragged. Sand seared her palms through her gloves. Ahead, Harper. He was 20 meters up, dragging a wounded man by the straps of his vest. Bullets carved lines through the dust. She could see them hot, white, close. "Harper, stop," she shouted. "You're in the open." He didn't stop. Harper never stopped. "Get them home, Tors," he yelled back. Then the second blast came. The ground lifted. Time dissolved. For a heartbeat there was no gravity, no direction, no sound, just light and debris. When the world slammed back down, she was on her back, ears ringing, mouth full of sand. The smell of blood and diesel filled her lungs. "Harper," she screamed. No answer. She crawled through the smoke, elbows burning, hands bleeding. Found him half buried under a slab of concrete, face gray with dust, eyes still open. "Don't," she whispered, trying to lift the debris. "Don't you dare." He coughed, the sound wet and final. A trickle of blood ran down his temple. His hand found hers, weak but steady. "You get them home, Tors. I can't leave you." He smiled, faint, broken. "You already promised." Then his grip loosened. For a long moment there was no sound, just the hum of fire eating the air. Rachel pressed her palm against his chest, feeling nothing but the echo of what had been. Something in her went quiet that day, not shattered, just sealed. The part that laughed, the part that flinched, the part that asked why instead of how. The rest of her, the soldier part, kept moving. She radioed for evac, dragged the wounded one by one, and held the line until the birds came. By dawn, half the team was gone, but the survivors lived because she didn't stop. Because Harper had made her promise. The sound of rain on the window dragged her back to the present. Rachel blinked. The desk light flickered again, chasing ghosts from the corners. She looked down at the trident, the edges worn smooth, the engraving barely visible. "Still keeping my promise," she said softly. Her voice cracked, the way it only did when no one was there to hear it. For a long moment she didn't move. The weight of memory settled across her shoulders like an invisible rucksack, heavy, familiar, necessary. She thought of her cadets, Vaughn, Briggs, Mills, all of them loud, young, arrogant. She'd seen their type before. Every SEAL had. Every war did. Arrogance was just ignorance in uniform. But it could be shaped, broken down, forged. That's what Harper had done for her. And now, years later, she was doing the same. She reached into the box again, lifting the trident patch between her fingers. The light caught on the metal's dull surface. "You'd laugh if you saw me now," she whispered. "Teaching cadets how to crawl." The corner of her mouth twitched. A shadow of a smile, small but real. Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle. The base lights flickered on the wet parade ground, reflections dancing like ghosts of drills past. Rachel leaned back in her chair, eyes on the window. Her reflection stared back, the same woman but older, quieter. The scar below her collarbone caught the light for a moment before fading again under shadow. Sometimes, when the nights got too long, she'd hear their voices. Not words, just sound. The rhythm of boots on sand, the whisper of rifles being loaded, the click of comms. Ghosts that didn't haunt, they reminded. She remembered Harper laughing once after a firefight, bleeding from the arm, still cracking jokes. "You know, tours," he'd said, "everyone thinks leadership is about giving orders, but it's not. It's about weight." She'd frowned. Weight. Yeah, the kind you can't put down even when the fight over. Back then she'd thought she understood. She didn't, not until Helmand. Not until she had to carry the kind of weight that doesn't fit in a ruck. Now, sitting alone in that quiet barracks room, she understood completely. Every cadet she trained, every crawl through the mud, every lesson that began with defiance and ended in silence, it was her way of lifting that weight again, of honoring the promise that no medal, no speech, no ceremony could ever repay. The clock ticked past midnight. The hum of the air unit filled the room like soft static. Rachel stood, folded the trident's cloth, and placed it gently back in the box beside the photo. Her fingers lingered over Harper's grin, sunlit, eternal. "Still keeping them home," she whispered. "Just one cadet at a time." She closed the lid with a quiet click, then sat for a while longer, letting the silence settle around her. The rain had stopped completely now. The base was still. Somewhere outside, the sea wind carried the faint scent of salt. Rachel rose, straightened her uniform, and moved to the window. The training field was empty, slick with moonlight. The same ground that had tested her cadets now gleamed like glass, quiet, earned, sacred in its own way. She touched her wristband, the worn leather that hid the faint imprint of the trident beneath. A secret no one else needed to see. To her, it wasn't a symbol of glory. It was a reminder that survival wasn't the end of the story. Teaching others how to survive, that was. In the distance, thunder murmured over the ocean. Rachel watched the horizon where sea met sky and darkness met dawn. Her reflection blurred in the window, dissolving into the storm beyond it. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe without armor. Discipline wasn't just endurance. It was grace under weight. The lesson Harper taught her. The one she was teaching them. And the one she'd carry until she couldn't anymore. Outside, the flag over Fort Adams fluttered once, catching the faintest light of morning. Tomorrow, the drills would start again. The cadets would complain. The mud would wait. But tonight the base slept easy. And somewhere inside that silence, Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres, the woman they once mocked, sat quietly at her desk, head bowed, hand resting over a folded trident. Keeping her promise. One more night. Why did the wind feel different that morning? Sharper, colder, like the air itself was holding its breath. The dawn came in pale streaks of silver across Fort Adams. The ocean fog rolled through the trees, blurring the horizon. Every sound, boots, gates, gravel, echoed with tension. The cadets stood in full gear on the staging ground, helmets fastened, weapons slung low. The last week had hardened them not just in muscle but in silence. They no longer joked when Rachel passed. They didn't dare. She walked down the line, inspecting each of them with quiet precision. Her face gave nothing away. "Today's exercise," she began, "isn't about drills." Her voice was even, almost calm. "It's about decisions, about how you move when you think no one's watching." Vaughn stood near the front, his jaw tight. He hadn't spoken to her since the day of the briefing, not out of fear, out of respect. Rachel gestured to the trucks idling nearby. "You'll be dropped 10 clicks west of the ridge. Your objective, recover a signal beacon from the crash site and extract within 90 minutes. You'll have comms but no external support." She paused. "Assume everything out there wants to stop you." A murmur ran through the line, a mixture of adrenaline and unease. "Understood." "Yes, ma'am." "Good," she nodded once, "because this isn't just an evaluation, it's a mirror." They didn't understand what she meant, not yet. 40 minutes later, the trucks rumbled into the woods beyond the base. Trees swallowed them. Mud spattered windshields. The deeper they drove, the quieter the world became, until even the sound of the engine seemed nervous. Inside the lead vehicle, Vaughn studied the map on his wrist display. "Beacon, supposed to be down near Sector 12, he said. "If we move fast, we'll make it in 70. Briggs leaned against the side rail. "If the mud doesn't eat us alive first." "Then crawl," Vaughn replied. Mills checked his gear, nodding quietly. "Let's just not mess this up." Rachel sat in the back, silent, her face half hidden behind her cap. She wasn't leading this time. She was watching. The truck stopped near a ravine. "From here it's on foot," she said, stepping down. "Remember, I'm not part of your team today. I'm your shadow." Her tone was ice. "Move." The forest was dense, roots snaking through the wet ground. Mist wrapped around them like gauze. Every step crunched with the sound of soaked leaves and nerves. They moved in a wedge formation, Vaughn up front, Briggs and Mills flanking, two others behind covering the rear. "Keep spacing," Vaughn whispered, eyes open. For the first 20 minutes, it was textbook perfect, quiet communication, steady progress. Rachel followed from a distance, watching their formations, their breathing, their choices. They were doing well, better than she expected. Then the static hit. A crackle through the earpieces, a faint voice garbled. "Signal beacon movement unknown." Vaughn froze. "Say again." "Nothing, just static." He looked back at the team. Could be interference. Mills frowned. "Or part of the test." Briggs muttered, "She loves this mind game crap." Rachel heard it all through the instructor feed in her headset. The uncertainty, the guessing, the tension spreading like wildfire. She didn't interfere, not yet. The team pushed forward, pace quickening as the fog thickened. The trees began to twist, gnarled and unfamiliar. It was easy to lose direction out here, even easier to lose calm. Then came the sound. Distant, sharp. Like a crack of dry wood, but too precise. Gunfire. 3 rounds, then silence. The team hit the ground instantly, instincts overriding training. "Contact," Vaughn hissed. "Could be part of the simulation," Briggs said. "Blanks, maybe." Rachel's headset stayed silent. She wasn't supposed to intervene, but something about that sound cut too clean. She checked the safety switch on her own rifle. It was off. That wasn't part of the drill. "Stay low," Vaughn whispered, scanning through the scope. "I don't see." A bullet hit the tree trunk 2 inches from his head. "Cover, move." The forest erupted. The cadets scrambled behind logs and ridges, returning fire on reflex. Rachel sprinted forward, low and fast, sliding into cover beside Vaughn. "This wasn't planned," he shouted. "No," she said flatly, eyes narrowing. "It was." Another shot rang out closer this time. Then silence again. Rachel's training took over. Her body moved before thought. "Who's hit?" "None," Mills called out. "Good, stay down." She raised her comm. "Base, this is Commander Torres. We have live fire on grid Delta 7. Confirm exercise parameters." "Static." Then a faint reply. "Negative, no active units in your zone. Repeat, none." Her stomach dropped. This wasn't a test anymore. They waited. 5 minutes, 10. No movement, just fog and fear. Vaughn's breathing was rough. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "what do we do?" Rachel's voice was calm, clipped, lethal. "We move, quietly, eyes up, weapons ready. We're not targets unless we act like them." The cadets nodded, faces pale beneath the grime. Rachel led them now, not as an instructor, but as a soldier. Every motion was silent, deliberate. Her boots left barely a trace on the wet ground. They advanced through the fog until the trees opened into a small clearing. There, a downed drone, smoke rising from its side. The beacon. Vaughn exhaled. There it is. Rachel raised her hand. Wait. Her eyes scanned the ground, too quiet, too easy. The hairs on her neck lifted. Then she saw it. Tripwire, barely visible, glistening under the moisture. Back, she hissed. The team froze. She crouched, tracing the wire with her fingers to its anchor, a crude rig, not military issue, not part of the exercise. Someone been here, she whispered. Vaughn looked around. Who? Rachel didn't answer. Her eyes had gone distant, calculating. Whoever set this wasn't playing war games. The fog shifted again, and in the distance a shadow moved. A figure. Then another. Rachel's pulse slowed. She raised her rifle, sighting down the scope. Unmarked fatigues, local militia gear. 3 men, moving through the trees with quiet purpose. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Everyone down, no movement. The cadets froze, wide-eyed. Through the scope, Rachel watched the figures stop at the edge of the clearing. One of them gestured toward the drone. Foreign voices, rough, urgent. They were scavengers, smugglers maybe, looking to strip the drone for tech. But they had weapons, and their safety switches were off. Rachel made her decision fast. If she opened fire, she'd expose her cadets. If she stayed silent, they could be surrounded. Her hand trembled for a second, not with fear, but with the weight of choice. The same kind Harper once carried. Then she lowered her rifle. She turned to Vaughn. We're not here to fight, she whispered. We move east, slow and silent, copy. He nodded, copy. They backed away 1 step at a time. The figures stayed focused on the wreckage. For once, luck was kind. When they were far enough, Rachel exhaled slowly. That, she said softly, wasn't in your lesson plan. Vaughn glanced at her. Why didn't you take the shot? She looked at him for a long time. Because leadership isn't about pulling the trigger first. It's about knowing when not to. By the time they reached the extraction zone, 90 minutes had passed. The trucks were waiting, headlights cutting through the fog. Colonel Hayes stood near the lead vehicle, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Rachel climbed down first, motioning for the cadets to disembark. Mud streaked their faces. Their silence said everything. Hayes eyed her, heard you had interference. Not interference, she said, visitors. His brow furrowed. You mean? 3 unknowns, armed. We avoided contact. He nodded slowly, understanding. Then he glanced at the cadets. They did well. Rachel looked over at them, standing in formation, exhausted but steady. They did, she said. They moved like a unit. She paused, letting the words sink in. They made choices I can respect. Vaughn met her gaze. For the first time, she saw something new in his eyes, not guilt, not defiance, understanding. He stepped forward slightly. Ma'am, he said quietly, how'd you know they wouldn't see us? Rachel's answer was simple. I didn't. Then she turned away, walking toward the observation deck as the trucks rolled back to base. That night, as the fog lifted and the moon rose over the training field, Rachel stood alone at the edge of the perimeter. The wind was soft, carrying the faint smell of salt and steel. Colonel Hayes approached quietly, hands in his pockets. You could have engaged, he said. I know. You didn't. She nodded. Not every threat needs to be destroyed. Some just need to be understood. He studied her for a long moment. They're ready, aren't they? She didn't look at him. Not yet, but they're learning. Hayes nodded, watching the cadets in the distance, silhouettes moving under floodlights, cleaning their gear, laughing softly now, unafraid. You gave them something no textbook could, he said. Rachel exhaled, eyes distant. I gave them silence. He frowned, silence. She turned slightly, a faint smile ghosting her lips. Yeah, the kind that makes you listen. Later, when the base fell quiet again, Rachel sat alone by the edge of the field. The stars shimmered faintly above the dark trees. She thought of Harper, of Helmond, of promises kept and promises still waiting. "Sometimes," she murmured, "the hardest fight is the one you never fire a bullet in." The wind carried her words away, toward the ocean, the horizon, the memory of everything she'd survived. Why did the air feel heavier at night? The base slept under a canopy of stars, but the wind carried unease, that kind of quiet before something breaks. The cadets had grown sharper, tougher, smarter. The arrogance was gone, replaced by endurance, but Rachel knew better than anyone growth never comes without a price. That night's drill was meant to be simple, a night navigation exercise across 2 kilometers of forest. Low visibility, minimal light, silent movement. But simplicity has a way of testing what complexity can't. Rachel stood by the operations tent, hands in her pockets, watching the cadets gear up under red lights. The glow turned their faces into ghosts, steady, focused, unaware of what the night had planned for them. Colonel Hayes joined her, clipboard in hand. "Last phase before graduation," he said quietly. "You've built them well." Rachel's eyes stayed on the tree line. "We'll see." Hayes gave a faint smile. "Still can't take a compliment, can you?" She didn't answer. Compliments were distractions, results were proof. He sighed and turned toward the base. "Try not to scare them too bad out there." Rachel didn't reply. She just adjusted her cap, took a breath, and stepped into the dark. The forest swallowed them whole. Boots sank into wet moss. Breath misted in the cold air. The moon was a thin blade behind the clouds, barely enough to see by. The cadets moved in formation, Vaughn leading point, Briggs tracking navigation, Mills watching the rear. Their voices were whispers, their steps measured. Rachel followed from a distance, silent, unseen, testing their awareness. Every few minutes she'd pause, listening. The forest had a rhythm, wind, branches, heartbeats. She knew when it shifted. They were halfway through the course when the first sound broke pattern, a faint metallic snap, out of place. Vaughn raised his fist. "Hold." Everyone froze. He crouched low, sweeping his flashlight across the path. Nothing, just wet roots and shadows. "Probably an animal trap," Briggs whispered. Rachel's voice came soft from behind them. "Then check your step." They nodded and pressed on, slower now, nerves sharpened. The sound came again, closer this time, a click, then a hiss. Before anyone could react, the ground beneath Vaughn gave way. The world folded under him, a sudden, violent drop. "Vaughn!" He hit the bottom hard, a dull thud echoing through the trees. Mud and roots collapsed around him, sending dirt into his eyes. His flashlight spun away, its beam trembling against the pit wall. "Hold position," Rachel ordered, sprinting forward. The others scrambled to the edge. The pit was deep, 6 feet down, maybe more, but it wasn't just a hole. Metal pipes jutted from the sides, one of them cutting a clean gash across Vaughn's thigh. Blood pooled fast in the muddy water. He bit down hard, trying not to scream. "Medic," Briggs shouted. Rachel's voice cut through. "No one moves, secure perimeter." Her boots slid against the mud as she dropped to her knees. The beam from her flashlight caught the metal edge of the trap, rusted, jagged. "Who the hell put this here?" Mills whispered. "Doesn't matter," Rachel said. "We deal with it now." She grabbed her field knife and slid down into the pit, landing beside Vaughn with a splash. The cold water hit her knees. He was pale, breathing fast. "Ma'am, it's deep. I can't." "Save your breath." She tore open a field dressing with her teeth, pressed it against the wound, and wrapped it tight with her belt. Blood still seeped through. "Stay with me," she said quietly. Above, Briggs leaned over the edge. "We've got a radio. I'll call for evac." Rachel froze. Protocol said yes. Report, wait, coordinate. But she knew how long it would take. 10 minutes to relay, 15 to deploy medics, maybe more. Vaughn didn't have that kind of time. His pulse was fatting beneath her fingers. "Negative," she called up. "We don't have 10 minutes." "Ma'am." "That's in order." She looked up, eyes hard. "Get me a rope now." Briggs and Mills scrambled, tying their lines together. Rachel pressed down harder on Vaughn's leg. "Listen to me," she said, voice low. "You're not dying here, you hear me?" He tried to nod, jaw clenched against the pain. "Yes, ma'am." When the rope dropped, Rachel looped it around his torso, knotting it fast. Her hands were shaking, but her voice never did. "Briggs, on my count. Mills, pull with him, no slack. 1, 2, pull." The rope strained. Mud sucked at Vaughn's boots like cement. Rachel braced herself against the wall, pushing up from below. "Come on," she hissed. "Move, damn it." Her boots slipped. Her knees slammed into stone, but she didn't stop. Another pull, harder this time, and Vaughn broke free from the suction. They dragged him up over the edge, collapsing in a heap on solid ground. Rachel climbed out last, covered in blood and mud, breath ragged. "Pressure," she ordered. Briggs knelt immediately, pressing down on the wound. Rachel tore open a fresh bandage, checked the bleeding, then glanced at her watch. 7 minutes since the fall. "Evac en route," Mills shouted. Rachel nodded, wiping mud from her face. Vaughn's eyes were half closed now, but he was conscious. "You did good," she said softly. He blinked, didn't even finish the course. "You finished more than that." Her voice wavered just once. The sound of approaching engines echoed through the trees. Floodlights cut through the mist as the medical team arrived, sprinting toward them. Rachel backed away, letting them take over. Her hands were still trembling, coated in blood that wasn't hers. An hour later, the medics confirmed the injury, deep but clean. No artery hit. He'd live. Rachel stood outside the infirmary tent, arms crossed, rain dripping from her hair. Colonel Hayes approached, silent for a moment before speaking. "You broke protocol." "I know. You risked your own life going in there." She looked at him. "He's alive." Hayes studied her face. "You think you can save them all?" Her answer was quiet, but it cut through the night. "I have to try." He nodded slowly. "You remind me of Harper." She flinched just slightly. Hayes sighed. "You did the right thing, but write it up. The board will ask." Rachel nodded, understood. He turned to leave, then paused. "You realize, don't you, they'd follow you anywhere now?" She didn't respond. She just watched the rain trace lines across the tent canvas. Later that night, she slipped into the infirmary. The room was dim, the hum of machines filling the silence. Vaughn lay half awake, eyes glassy, leg wrapped tight. When he saw her, he tried to sit up. "Ma'am." "Don't," she said softly, moving closer. "You need rest." He hesitated, then whispered, "You didn't have to come back for me." Rachel tilted her head. "That's exactly why I did." He frowned, "But you could have been hurt." She leaned forward, voice quiet but steady. "I've already been hurt, Vaughn, years ago. Lost people because I waited for permission to act." Her gaze drifted for a moment. The sound of explosions, Harper's voice, sand and fire. "Never again," she said. He swallowed hard. "Thank you." Rachel nodded. "You earned it." Then she stood, tucking the blanket closer around him before heading for the door. Her hand lingered on the frame. "Get some sleep, soldier. You've got one more dawn to face." Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten, that faint gray before sunrise. The base was still, save for the wind moving across the training field. Rachel stopped at the edge of it, staring out. The mud still bore the scars of their drills, footprints hardened into earth, reminders of struggle. Colonel Hayes' voice came from behind her. "You're thinking about him again, aren't you?" She didn't turn. "Always." Hayes nodded. "You kept your promise." Rachel shook her head. "Not yet. Promises don't end until they stop needing to be kept." Hayes looked out toward the horizon. "And when will that be?" Rachel exhaled slowly. when they don't need me anymore. The first light of morning crept across the field, catching the trident hidden beneath her wristband. The day would come soon, graduation, goodbyes, new orders. But for now, she stood alone in the quiet she'd earned. Not a silence of grief this time. A silence of peace. Because leadership isn't about glory. It's about weight, the kind you carry so others don't have to. Why did goodbyes always sound like silence? Fort Adams was awake before dawn, but no one spoke louder than the ocean. The waves rolled against the cliffs below the training ground, slow, steady, endless. Graduation day. The field was immaculate now. The mud that once swallowed boots had dried into solid ground. Flags hung perfectly still in the morning air. The cadets stood in formation, their uniforms clean, faces sharper. The same people who once mocked, doubted, and stumbled were now statues of resolve. Their laughter had changed. Softer. Real. Rachel Torres watched from a distance, arms crossed, wind tugging at her hair. She wasn't wearing medals or insignias, just the same mud-stained fatigue she'd worn since her first day here. Colonel Hayes approached quietly, a folder in hand. "You could have dressed up," he said, half teasing. She didn't look at him. "They don't need to see medals. They need to remember the dirt." Hayes smiled faintly. "You really don't do ceremonial, do you?" "Ceremony doesn't teach survival," she said. "Pain does." He chuckled softly. "You sound like Harper." Rachel's eyes flicked toward the horizon, a sliver of gold just breaking the clouds. "He taught me well." When the ceremony began, the cadets marched onto the field in perfect rhythm, every movement synchronized, every eye forward. The brass band played low, restrained, respectful. Rachel stood behind the podium, hands folded. Colonel Hayes introduced her simply. "Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres, instructor, veteran, and the reason these cadets are standing here today." The applause was quiet but genuine. Rachel stepped forward. Her boots crunched lightly against the gravel. She looked over them, the faces she'd pushed, broken, rebuilt. Vaughn, Briggs, Mills. The trio who once tested her patience now watched her with something close to reverence. She took a breath. "When I first came here," she began, "I was told not to expect much." A ripple of smiles crossed the formation, small, knowing. "Some of you didn't think I belonged here," she continued. "Some of you made sure I felt that." Vaughn's jaw tightened. Mills looked down. Rachel paused, letting the silence stretch until it almost hurt. "I didn't blame you then. I don't blame you now. Because ignorance," she said softly, "isn't permanent. But what you do with it, that's who you become." Her gaze swept the line. "Every one of you learned something out here, not from me, from this ground." She pointed toward the obstacle course behind them. "The mud pits, the walls, the trench. That mud taught you humility. Those walls taught you patience. And that pain you cursed taught you that strength doesn't shout." A beat of silence followed. "Strength," she said, "is the hand that keeps reaching even when it's tired." Colonel Hayes watched from the side, expression unreadable. Rachel's tone softened. "You're going to leave this place and forget a lot of what you learned. That's fine. Forget the drills, forget the times you failed, but don't forget this." She stepped closer to the formation. "The ground doesn't care who you are. It only knows who gets back up." Her voice cracked, not from weakness but truth. "Out there you'll face things that make this place look small. Pain that doesn't end when the whistle blows. Fear that doesn't wait for orders. You'll think you're alone. You won't be." She tapped the trident hidden beneath her wristband. "Because every soldier, every SEAL, every person who's ever carried someone through hell there with you, even the ones who didn't make it back." Her eyes found Vaughn. "You carry them by how you live." Vaughn nodded once, his throat tightening. Rachel took a breath. "That's all I ever wanted to teach you." Then she stepped back. "Congratulations, soldiers, you've earned your silence." The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was heavy, earned. When it faded, Hayes took the stage, giving his final salute. Then the cadets began their walk across the field, one by one receiving their insignias. Vaughn approached last. When he stopped in front of Rachel, he snapped to attention, eyes locked on hers. "Permission to speak, ma'am." She nodded. He hesitated, then said, "You changed the way I see everything." Rachel tilted her head slightly. "Did I?" "Yes, ma'am," he said, voice steady. "Before you, I thought leadership meant being loud. Now I know it means standing when no one else will." For a moment, Rachel just looked at him. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled something small, a tarnished piece of metal. Her old sealed trident. She held it between her fingers, the morning light catching the faded gold. "This was given to me by someone who taught me the same thing," she said quietly. Vaughn's eyes widened. "Ma'am, I can't." "You're not keeping it," she said, a faint smile ghosting her lips. "You're holding it for now." He took it carefully, reverently. "What do I do with it?" "Remember what it costs," she said. "Then give it to someone else who forgets." He nodded, throat tight. "Yes, ma'am." Rachel saluted him, sharp, precise, final. He returned it, then stepped back, the trident glinting in his palm. When the ceremony ended, the cadets dispersed into groups, laughter and relief spilling into the air. Rachel stood alone at the edge of the field. The sun was higher now, warm against her face. Colonel Hayes approached one last time, his boots crunching against the gravel. "You did it," he said. Rachel didn't answer. "They'll remember you," he added. She shook her head. "They'll remember what they became, that's enough." He smiled faintly. "You could stay, you know. Command wants you for another cycle." Rachel turned her gaze toward the horizon where the ocean met the sky. "No," she said softly. "It's time." Hayes nodded, understanding. "Where will you go?" "Home," she said, though her tone made it sound like a question. He chuckled. "You remember what that word means." She gave the faintest smile. "Maybe I'll find out." He extended his hand. She shook it, firm, brief, final. As she walked away, the wind caught her hair and the faint metallic glint of the trident under her wristband. That evening, Fort Adams was quiet again. The field was empty, the flag still, the kind of peace that only comes after struggle. Rachel's duffel sat on the steps of the barracks, light. She'd never owned much. She turned once, taking one last look at the place that had tested and redeemed her. Her hand brushed the wooden railing, the same one she'd leaned on during her first night here, when no one respected her name, when she was just the woman who thought she could teach soldiers. Now it was hers, not as a trophy, as a memory. She lifted her bag, shouldered it, and walked toward the main gate. As she passed the obstacle course, her footsteps slowed. The trench, the wall, the mud. She smiled just a little. In her mind, she could hear Harper's voice, clear as ever. "You get them home, Tors." She whispered back, "I did." Down by the docks, the evening light bled into the sea. The horizon shimmered gold, waves whispering against the shore. Rachel stood at the edge of the pier, boots on wood, hands in her pockets. The ocean stretched endless in front of her, the same one she'd flown over 100 times but never truly seen. For the first time in years, she let herself feel the weight lift. Not gone, just lighter. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small photograph, Harper and the team, all dust and grins. The edges were torn, corners faded. She looked at it a long time, then tucked it inside her jacket. "Still keeping the promise," she said quietly, "always." The wind caught her hair, carrying her words out to sea. The sky dimmed, stars beginning to burn through the fading light. Rachel turned away from the water, walking back toward the road. No orders, no mission, no title. Just a soldier who had done her part. She didn't need applause. She didn't need remembrance. She just needed to keep moving. As the waves crashed softly behind her, the final line of her story settled in the air, a truth too quiet for metals and too heavy for words. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And in that silence, her legend began.